The Pangalactic Tactical Institute did not exist on a planet. To anchor such a crucible of thought to a single world would be to tether it to a single gravity, a single sky, a single way of being. Instead, it hung in the void at the carefully calculated gravitational nexus of a trinary star system, a monument of pearlescent alloy and crystalline energy conduits known simply as the Apex. For 10,000 standard years, the Apex had taken the brightest military minds from the hundred-odd species of the Galactic Compact and forged them into legends. Its halls were a testament to diversity, built to accommodate beings of silicon and carbon, beings who breathed methane or oxygen, who communicated through sonic bursts, pheromonal clouds, or intricate light patterns. The Cathar, towering feline bipeds with scales of obsidian, walked with the patient grace of apex hunters, their combat doctrine a thing of beauty and honor. The glyptal, crystalline entities who floated a hand's breadth above the floors practiced strategies of geometric perfection, their wars fought with the cold precision of mathematics. The Signian ascendancy, ancient beings of pure energy housed in articulated shells, taught the philosophies of protracted, galaxy-spanning campaigns where centuries were mere moments in the grand strategic plan. Into this hallowed, ordered sanctuary came humanity. They were a curiosity wrapped in an enigma, a species barely a century out from their own solar system. A people who had unified not through enlightenment, but through exhaustion after a series of brutal, self-immolating conflicts. Their entry into the PGTI was a political maneuver, a gesture of inclusivity by the Compact towards a new, volatile member. No one expected them to excel. Cadet Xyler of the Cathar, third-born of the Skyclaw clan, observed their arrival from a high promenade overlooking the primary docking bay. His amber eyes, slitted against the harsh glare of the docking lights, narrowed. There were only 4 of them, a laughably small cohort. They walked down the ramp in their simple, dark gray utility uniforms, a stark contrast to the shimmering robes and exoskeletal armor of other delegations. They were soft, pinkish, brownish, soft-fleshed mammals, bipeds, but without the Cathar's digitigrade power or the Vintali's loping speed. They possessed no obvious natural armor, no claws, no visible weaponry integrated into their biology. Their senses seemed dull, their eyes, small and forward-facing, lacked the panoramic perception of his own kind, and their scent profile was bafflingly muted. They were, by every metric Xyler had been taught, prey. Look at them, hissed his clutchmate Riza, her own crest of quills ruffling in disdain. The Compact insists on these charity cases. They'll be washed out by the first cycle. Why do they bare their teeth like that? Is it a threat display? Xyler watched the human leader, a female with dark hair pulled back severely from a pale face, offer a fleeting, tight-lipped version of the expression to the waiting Signian proctor. It wasn't a threat. Xyler had studied the preliminary dossiers. It was called a smile, a gesture of appeasement or welcome, but it looked all wrong. It looked like a predator momentarily showing its weapons to signal it was choosing not to use them. The implication was unsettling. The 4 humans were led into the station, their soft-soled boots making almost no sound on the polished decks. Lieutenant Eva Ristova, the leader, had eyes the color of a winter storm. They darted everywhere, not with the wide-eyed wonder of a tourist, but with the sharp, assessing glint of a surveyor measuring a plot of land for a fortress. Beside her, Sergeant Kenji Tanaka walked with a stillness that was somehow more intimidating than the Cathar's overt physical presence. His gaze was flat, and he moved with an economy of motion that spoke of long, hard practice. Specialist Maya Singh, the youngest, seemed more open, her eyes taking in the grand architecture, but her hands were never far from the data pad strapped to her wrist. Bringing up the rear was Corporal Jax, a mountain of a man, silent and broad-shouldered, whose role seemed to be simply to exist in a large and immovable fashion. In the orientation amphitheater, Drill Master Vorn, a Signian whose articulated form had commanded this hall for 1,000 years, addressed the new intake. His voice was a series of resonant chimes, translated instantly by their personal devices. "You are the best your species have to offer," Vorn chimed, the light on his central photoreceptor pulsing rhythmically. "You are here to shed the skin of provincial thinking. The strategies that won you glory on your homeworlds are but a single dialect in the language of cosmic warfare. Here, you will learn the grammar of victory." Xyler felt a surge of pride. The Cathar way of war, the Catharvash, was a noble art form, a dance of flanking maneuvers and honorable challenges. It had carved out an empire, but he was here to learn more, to perfect the art. He glanced at the humans. They were listening, but their stillness was different from the reverent attention of the other cadets. It was the stillness of a stalking animal, waiting. Ristova's eyes were fixed on Vorn, but Xyler had the distinct impression she wasn't just hearing his words. She was analyzing his cadence, the structure of his shell, the faint energy shimmer around him, cataloging weaknesses. The thought was so alien, so disrespectful, that Xyler dismissed it as a fanciful projection. The initial training exercises seemed to confirm Xyler's assessment. In the zero-gravity combat simulators, the humans were clumsy, their terrestrial evolution a clear disadvantage. In marksmanship, their pulse rifles were effective, but they lacked the innate targeting instincts of a species with multi-spectrum vision. During the first tactical simulation, a simple planetary assault against a fortified position, the human team's performance was graded as adequate but uninspired. They followed the textbook, albeit with a strange, grim efficiency. They fight without flair, Riza commented in the mess hall, expertly dissecting a haunch of synth meat with her wrist claws. There is no beauty in their movements, no honor in their advance. It is plumbing, a dirty job to be finished. Xyler had to agree. He had led his own team in the same simulation. They had executed a flawless pincer movement, a textbook skyclaw gambit, drawing the enemy out before closing the trap. It was elegant. The humans had simply laid down a wall of suppressing fire and walked forward, taking predictable, calculated losses until they reached their objective. Brutish, simple, yet there were whispers, small things. Leary, a glyptal cadet whose species communicated through empathetic projection, confessed she found it difficult to be near the humans. Their minds are loud, she had projected to Xyler in a private conversation, her crystalline form shimmering with unease. Not their surface thoughts, those are quiet, but beneath there is a constant, grinding engine of calculation, threat assessment, resource analysis, a predator's calculus running ceaselessly. When you look at a landscape, Xyler, you see beauty, tactical positions. When they look at it, they see choke points, cover, fields of fire, and how many calories they can harvest from the local fauna. Xyler had found the observation absurd. But he couldn't shake it. He started watching them more closely. In a resource management exercise, cadets were given a set amount of credits to equip a platoon for a month-long counterinsurgency campaign. Xyler and his Cathar brethren invested heavily in superior firepower, advanced shielding, and high-mobility transports. The honor of the warrior demanded the best equipment. The human team's budget allocation was bizarre. They purchased basic, rugged, projectile-based weaponry, chemically propelled slugs, ancient by galactic standards. They spent a pittance on armor. The bulk of their budget went into 3 areas: medical supplies, food rations, and information systems. Not advanced AI-driven battle nets, but encrypted, low-bandwidth communication scramblers and decryption keys. They are equipping a refugee column, not an army, Riza scoffed during the review, but Instructor Vorn paused at the human submission, his photoreceptor glowing with an unreadable intensity. Lieutenant Ristova, his chimes echoed, explain your unorthodox allocation, stepped forward. Her voice was flat, devoid of the usual cadet eagerness. An insurgency is not won by firepower, drill master. It is won by attrition and intelligence. The enemy lives among the population. You cannot outfight them, you must outlast them. Our soldiers will eat when theirs starve. Our soldiers will get medical care when theirs die of infection from a minor wound. And while your heavily armed patrols announce their presence from a kilometer away, we will be listening to their communications, learning their patterns, turning their own network against them. The rifles are just for when we have to knock on the door. The real war will be fought with bread, bandages, and whispers. A silence fell over the lecture hall. It was a philosophy so profoundly unglorious, so grindingly practical, that it felt obscene. Warfare as a matter of logistics and espionage, not a clash of warriors. Xyler felt a prickle of something he couldn't name. It wasn't contempt anymore. It was a cold knot of apprehension. The change in perception began to ripple through the student body. The humans were no longer seen as just weak. They were different. Their pragmatism was unsettling. In a survival exercise on a barren moon, where most teams focused on constructing shelters and finding water, the human team was found to have set a series of complex, cruel-looking traps around the only freshwater source, not to catch the local wildlife for food, but to disable competing teams. They didn't injure them badly, just enough to force a medical evacuation from the exercise. When confronted, Sergeant Tanaka, his face a mask of indifference, simply said it was the most efficient way to secure the objective. Then came the announcement of the final exercise of the term. The Xylos anomaly. It was the stuff of legend at the apex, a multi-day, full-immersion simulation so complex and demanding that it broke nearly every cadet who attempted it. Vorn himself briefed the teams in the main holographic amphitheater. A moon Xylos spun in the center of the room, a gray pockmarked sphere. The colony on Xylos, population 5,000, has been seized by a radical faction known as the Argent Shroud. They are well-armed, highly organized, and led by a rogue military AI from the Celestian Wars. Their command and control is centralized in the primary communications hub in the capital city of Meridian. The simulation parameters appeared beside the moon. Your objective is to infiltrate Meridian and neutralize the AI, seizing the comms hub. The rules of engagement are strict. You must minimize civilian casualties and collateral damage. The Argent Shroud has integrated its forces with the populace. A direct assault would be a massacre. You will be judged on efficiency, tactical acumen, and adherence to the Compact's ethical warfare doctrines. Xyler's team was a model of interspecies cooperation. 2 Cathar for shock assault, a Glyptal for strategic analysis, and a Vintali scout for reconnaissance. Their plan was elegant, a surgical strike that relied on speed, stealth, and overwhelming force at the decisive point. It was a plan that would have been celebrated in the annals of the Cathar Vash. By a twist of fate, or perhaps by Vorn's design, the 4 humans were designated as a single, standalone team. Team designation, Hyena. They were given the same objective, the same constraints. In the staging area, as Xyler's team ran final diagnostics on their gleaming armor, he saw Rostova huddled with her people. There were no grand schematics on their hollow table. They were looking at a simple map of the city's infrastructure, power grids, water lines, sewage systems. They are lost already, Riza murmured, polishing her plasma rifle. Xyler wasn't so sure. He watched as Rostova's lips moved, her expression grim. He saw Tanaka nod, his hand resting on the hilt of a wicked-looking combat knife. He saw Singh's fingers flying across her datapad, her face illuminated by cascading lines of code. And Jax was simply cleaning a heavy, brutal-looking projectile weapon, the kind that didn't stun, the kind that tore things apart. The feeling was back, that cold knot of apprehension. He was watching something primal, something the polished halls of the Apex had forgotten existed. The simulation began. The moment Team Hyena inserted into the simulated city of Meridian, they vanished. Xyler's team, designated Saber, began its meticulous reconnaissance. Their Vintali scout, moving like a ghost through the city's upper levels, mapped patrol routes and sentry positions. Leary, their Glyptal analyst, began constructing a probability matrix, predicting the AI's response to various stimuli. It was professional, it was precise, it was by the book. The instructors, led by Vorn, watched from the Overwatch Nexus, a darkened chamber where dozens of holographic displays showed every conceivable angle of the simulation. They saw Team Saber's cautious, intelligent progress. Of Team Hyena, they saw nothing. Their trackers showed them holed up in a derelict industrial sector, 2 kilometers from the nearest objective. They weren't moving. They weren't transmitting. Are they having equipment failure? One of the junior instructors, a lanky Pithashian, asked. Unlikely, Vorn's chimes replied, his tone patient. The humans pride themselves on robust, simple technology. They are waiting or planning. For 22 standard hours, the humans did nothing but watch. Singh had tapped into the city's civilian comms net, not the encrypted military channels, but the equivalent of social media feeds, public announcements, and maintenance requests. She wasn't looking for troop movements. She was building a psychological profile of the populace, gauging their mood, their fear, their resentment towards the Argent Shroud occupiers. Tanaka and Jax, meanwhile, were not idle. They ventured out in short, silent bursts, not to scout the enemy, but to collect things. Discarded power cells, scraps of metal, chemical solvents from industrial workshops. Rostova's plan was coalescing, and it had nothing to do with a surgical strike. The objective was to neutralize the AI in the comms hub. The rules were to minimize civilian casualties and collateral damage. Rostova looked at these rules not as moral imperatives, but as system constraints to be exploited. The AI, she reasoned, was a logical entity. It would follow its programming. It would protect the civilians because the simulation told it they were hostages. It would try to preserve the city because the simulation told it that was its asset. The AI was playing chess. Rostova was about to knock over the board. Kenji Jax, she said, her voice a low murmur in their squalid hideout. The aqueduct, Sector Gamma 7, I want it salted. Not with poison, just industrial brine from the tannery next door. Make it undrinkable. The aqueduct supplies the main residential district, Lieutenant, Singh noted, not looking up from her screen. Over 2,000 civilians. No, Rostova said. The Shroud will have to start distributing their bottled water reserves. It's a logistical drain. More importantly, it breeds resentment. The people see their taps run foul, and they see the occupiers handing out water. Who do they blame? Next, Tanaka and Jax began a campaign of low-level sabotage. They didn't blow up ammo dumps or barracks. They cut fiber optic cables to residential blocks, severing entertainment and personal comms. They created phantom power drains that caused rolling blackouts in civilian sectors. They introduced minor, annoying corruptions into the public transit system, making shuttles run late or not at all. Each act was small, insignificant on its own, but together they began to fray the fabric of the city. Life under the Argent Shroud, which had been orderly and stable, was suddenly becoming inconvenient, irritating, and miserable. From the Overwatch Nexus, the instructors watched in bewilderment. What is their strategy? The Pythosian instructor hissed. They are actively antagonizing the civilian population. Their sympathy metrics are plummeting. No, Vorn chimed, his tone losing its customary placidity. They are not antagonizing the civilians. They are making the civilians antagonize the occupiers. They are weaponizing discomfort. Argent Shroud AI, a sophisticated tactical engine named Legion, registered the anomalies. Its logical processes concluded that these were minor acts of civic disobedience or system decay. It diverted resources to public works, sending out technical crews to repair the damage. Each time they found nothing, the saboteurs having long since vanished. The AI was being bled not of soldiers, but of focus and goodwill. Meanwhile, Team Saber was making progress. They had identified a maintenance conduit that would take them to within 100 meters of the comms hub. It was a classic infiltration route. They were preparing for their assault. They were playing the game. That's when Rostova made her move. It was a masterpiece of psychological cruelty. Singh had isolated the frequency used by the Argent Shroud's internal comms, the channel the AI used to give orders to its humanoid robotic enforcers. She couldn't crack the encryption, not yet, but she could jam it, not with white noise, but with something far more insidious. Using the sound samples she had collected from the civilian net, she began broadcasting. It was a carefully curated audio stream, a child crying, the sound of a domestic argument, snippets of pre-takeover news broadcasts about peace and prosperity, laughter. To the robotic enforcers, it was meaningless data. But the AI Legion, programmed with advanced heuristics to understand and control a population, was forced to process it. Its subroutines, designed to monitor civilian morale, were flooded with chaotic, emotionally charged, irrelevant information. The AI was being psychologically attacked, its processing cycles consumed by digital ghosts. The first stars, Vorn whispered, the chimes of his voice for once unsteady. She is waging war on the enemy's mind. The AI was distracted. Rostova initiated Phase 2. She had identified the city's primary power relay station. It was located directly beneath the Meridian Central Hospital, the largest civilian medical facility. The rules of engagement made it an untouchable target. Any attack would cause catastrophic civilian casualties and constitute a supreme violation. Zyler's team, viewing the tactical map, had marked it in red. An absolute no-go zone. Rostova marked it as the primary target. Maya, give me a precise demolition schematic, she ordered. I don't want to level the building. I want to crack the foundation and sever the primary power conduit beneath it. Jax, Kenji, you'll place the charges. Minimal explosive yield, maximum structural shock. Lieutenant, Singh's voice was strained. The simulation will register hundreds of civilian deaths. We will fail the exercise. Exercise is to neutralize the AI, Rostova countered, her voice like ice. The rules are a barrier designed to protect it. We are not failing the exercise. We are changing the parameters of victory. The AI is using the civilians as a shield. We are going to take that shield away. Tanaka and Jax moved out. They didn't storm the hospital. They infiltrated the sub-basement through a sewage pipe, a route they had identified on the first day. They placed their small, high-impact charges on key structural supports directly above the power conduit. In the Overwatch Nexus, a red light began flashing on Vorn's console. Drill Master Team Hyena is placing explosive charges in the civilian hospital's foundation. the Pythosian cried out, aghast. "This is monstrous. We have to terminate their simulation." "No," Vorn's voice was a low hum, his photoreceptor fixed on the main screen. "Let it play out," he had to see. He had to understand. Rostova gave the order. The charges detonated. The effect was not a fiery explosion, but a brutal, jarring shock. On the simulation display, the hospital building visibly slumped. Red icons flared across the screen like a bloody rash, simulated casualties, hundreds of them. The city's power grid, severed from its heart, died. Lights went out. Systems failed. Meridian was plunged into darkness and chaos. The AI Legion was blind. Its optical sensors across the city went dark. Its control over its enforcer bots became patchy, reliant on short-range battery power. And its psychological warfare defenses, already strained by Singh's audio assault, were now contending with the genuine panic of the civilian population. The AI was deafened by screams, both real and artificial. Team Saber, deep in their infiltration tunnel, was suddenly plunged into blackness. Their advanced systems flickered, falling back on emergency power. Their meticulously planned assault was in shambles. "What's happening?" Riza's voice crackled over their comms. "Report. Total citywide power failure," Leary projected, her thoughts laced with confusion. "Seismic event localized at the central hospital. It appears to have been a deliberate attack." The human team, Zyler felt a cold dread wash over him, colder than the dark tunnel. They hadn't attacked the enemy. They had attacked the city. They had attacked the very concept of the rules. "This is insanity," Riza snarled. "They have murdered civilians to turn off the lights. Did not seem to be their objective," Zyler replied, his voice hollow. In the chaos, Team Hyena moved. Clad in night vision gear, they were the only ones prepared for the darkness they had created. The Argent Shroud enforcers were floundering, their programming unable to cope with the simultaneous power loss, communications jamming, and civilian panic. They were designed to suppress an orderly populace, not to control a terrified mob in the dark. Rostova's team didn't fight the patrols. They ghosted past them. They reached the comms hub, which was now running on isolated emergency power, its external defenses inert. The elite guards stationed there had been redeployed by the AI to the hospital, the site of the attack. The hub was virtually undefended. Jax used a single, heavy shotgun slug to blow the lock off the main door. The sound was deafening in the sudden silence. They stormed the server room. The AI's physical presence, a pulsating core of light and data, was helpless. It could not electrify the floor. It could not vent neurotoxin. It could not summon reinforcements. Rostova had severed its arms and legs before walking up and slitting its throat. Singh slapped a device onto the core's interface. It wasn't a decryption tool. It was a logic bomb, a virulent code worm designed by Singh herself. "Uploading," she said calmly. "It's in." AI Legion didn't just shut down. The virus Singh unleashed, carried on the last vestiges of the network, was designed for one purpose: to find the core programming of any connected system and erase it, bricking the hardware. One by one across the city, the robotic enforcers stopped, their optical lights fading to black. They didn't just deactivate. They became useless blocks of metal. The simulation ended. The results screen in the Overwatch Nexus was a thing of schizophrenic contradiction. Team Hyena objective complete. Yes, time ELAPSED. 28 hours, 14 MINUTES, record, civilian CASULTIS, 847 catastrophic failure, infrastructure damage, critical failure, rules of engagement VIOLATIONS. 12 expulsion level failure. The instructors were silent. They stared at the screen, at the impossible pairing of a record-breaking victory with a litany of failures that should have seen the cadets dishonorably discharged and sent home in shame. They had won by every metric of success that mattered on a real battlefield. They had won an overwhelming, total victory. They hadn't just defeated the enemy. They had annihilated its capacity to wage war, dismantled its infrastructure, and turned the population against it, all in just over a day. Team Saber was still stuck in a dark tunnel. The debriefing was held in a stark, white room. Vorn stood before the 4 humans. Zyler and his team were present, ordered to observe. Zyler looked at Rostova. She didn't look triumphant. She didn't look ashamed. She looked tired. "Lieutenant Rostova," Vorn's chimes were flat, stripped of all resonance. "Explain yourself," completed the objective drill master. She stated simply, "You were instructed to minimize civilian casualties. You caused the deaths of 847 simulated beings. They were acceptable losses," Rostova replied, her voice unwavering. The AI was using the civilian population as a shield. It was a tactical obstacle. I removed it. The sheer, brutal honesty of the statement sucked the air from the room. Zyler saw Riza's quills flatten against her back in shock and horror. Acceptable losses. They were talking about a hospital full of people. That obstacle was the core of the ethical problem. The Pythoshian instructor burst out. The entire point of the exercise was to find a solution that did not involve sacrificing civilians. That solution did not exist, Rostova said, turning her icy gaze on him. Not against a superior, entrenched force led by a logistical genius AI. Your exercise presented us with a choice. Play by the rules and lose, letting the insurgency fester and likely causing more death in the long run through a protracted conflict, or break the rules to achieve a swift, total, and final victory. We chose victory, Tanaka spoke for the first time, his voice a low rasp. War isn't clean, it isn't a game of honor, it's a disease. You don't treat a cancer by negotiating with it, you cut it out. And sometimes you have to cut out some healthy tissue to save the patient. We saved the patient, the city is free. Zyler finally found his voice. You call that freedom, he demanded, stepping forward. You terrorized them. You poisoned their water, stole their light, and collapsed their hospital. They will fear you more than they ever feared the Argent Shroud. Looked at him, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of something other than cold calculus in her eyes. It might have been pity. Fear is a tool, Cadet Zyler. It can be a far more effective deterrent than a wall or a fleet. They won't fear us. They will fear what happens when order breaks down. They will cling to whatever new authority restores their water and power. We didn't just give them back their city. We gave them a desperate, clawing need for the stability that the compact and not a rogue AI can provide. We didn't just win a battle, we won the peace that follows, a peace built on the memory of a terrible night. The room fell silent again. Vorn, the ancient Signian, the being who had taught strategy to 10 generations of the galaxy's greatest commanders, slowly turned to face the other instructors. For 10,000 years, his chimes were soft, barely audible. We have taught the art of civilized warfare. We have operated under the assumption that all intelligent species, at their core, desire to minimize conflict, to fight with honor and restraint. We have been teaching children how to duel. He turned back to the humans. His photoreceptor seemed to dim, as if in deep contemplation. The humans, they do not duel. They do not see war as a contest. They see it as a condition of survival, an existential threat to be eliminated by any means necessary. They have given us a lesson not in tactics, but in philosophy. A philosophy born in mud and blood on a world where they were not the strongest or the fastest, but where they learned to be the most ruthless thinkers. He looked at Ristova, at Tanaka, at Singh and Jax. He saw not 4 cadets, but the avatar of a terrifying new reality. They are the hyenas at the lion's feast, he chimed, a chill running through his translated words. Not strong enough to make the kill in a noble charge, so they wait, they watch, they sow discord, they attack the young, the sick, the supply lines. They do not care about the glory of the hunt. They care only that they are the ones who walk away fed. And we, the proud lions of the galaxy, have forgotten they exist. The dismissal was quiet. The humans were confined to their quarters, pending a full review by the compact command. But everyone knew it wasn't a punishment. It was a quarantine. The other cadets no longer met the humans' eyes. They would cross to the other side of a corridor to avoid them. The fear that had been a vague curiosity was now a concrete, palpable thing. That night, Zyler couldn't rest. He replayed the simulation logs, watching the cold, brutal efficiency of the humans. He saw the logic. It was undeniable. It was also horrifying. His code of honor, the Katharvash, felt like a child's fairy tale in the face of such pragmatism. Had his species' entire history of glorious warfare been nothing but a game, played because their opponents had always agreed to the same rules? He stood at his viewport, looking out at the trinary stars. Humanity was no longer a charity case. They were no longer a joke. They were a weapon the galaxy did not know how to wield, and a predator it did not know how to cage. They hadn't just passed the test. They had broken the school, and in doing so, had taught everyone a lesson that would echo through the stars for millennia. In the grand calculus of survival, a hyena's smile is far more terrifying than a lion's roar.